This conference will now be recorded.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you hear me? Can you see the slide properly?
Ma'am.
Can you see the slide? Alma. Hi. Hello. So sometime back we have learnt about anemia in pregnancy, is it not? Anemia, we said it is the most common medical disorder in pregnancy. Okay? Yes or no? Hello, Sweta. Muskan, Shaikh, Snehita, can you hear? Unmute చేయాలేమో వాళ్ళది ఆడియో ఇస్తే ఉందా హలో స్నేహిత can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Ma'am.
What is pregnancy? Yes or no? Visesh, are you there?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
What is the most common medical disorder in pregnancy?
Anemia.
Anemia. Very good. Correct.
Anemia.
Anemia we have already learned. So today we are going to learn about jaundice in pregnancy, which is not common. It's a rare disorder in contrast to anemia, which is most common, right? So jaundice in pregnancy is relatively rare, hardly 1 in 1,000 deliveries. Okay, but the importance is it has got a very serious complications, consequences for both the mother as well as for the baby. That's the reason why we should learn about jaundice in pregnancy, though it is rare. Okay. Okay, yes or no?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Learn about it.
Yes, ma'am.
Serious complications for the mother and the baby. Okay. So 3 to 5% of pregnant women will have abnormal liver function tests. Okay, can be because of pregnancy, or the hormonal changes which occur in pregnancy, or may occur intercurrently. That means along with some other disorders. So before we know about any medical disorder in pregnancy, we should know about the normal physiological changes which occur in pregnancy. Then only we will be able to interpret. So like how we were talking about anemia, we were discussing the normal hematological changes which occur in pregnancy. Then only you can relate it to the pathology. So in the same way, heart disease, you should know the normal cardiovascular changes. Okay. If you're talking about coagulation problems during pregnancy, you should know what coagulation changes occur normally in pregnancy. So likewise, when you are talking about jaundice in pregnancy, you should know what is happening normally to the liver in pregnancy. So normal physiological changes should be there so that you can compare it with the pathological changes. Okay. So liver function tests, these are non-specific indicators of liver cell damage. So what are they? They are AST, ALT, okay, GGT, in total bilirubin. So they all remain unchanged in pregnancy, or they may be reduced due to hemodilution, right? So all liver function tests, AST, ALT, GGT, then total bilirubin, they are all unchanged or reduced because of hemodilution. The only liver enzyme which rises because it is produced from the placenta is alkaline phosphatase. So this alkaline phosphatase is the only hepatic enzyme which rises throughout pregnancy, reaching a peak in the third trimester, almost 300% above the non-pregnant levels. very high levels you will see during pregnancy because it is produced from the placenta. So when you see the LFT in a pregnant lady and you find alkaline phosphatase raised, we should not term it as an abnormal because it's a normal physiological increase because of placental contribution. Okay, then fall steadily in the postnatal period. Likewise, transaminases, there is a slight rise because that now the physiological dilation is lost now because of ontological loss and other things. They start slowly rising for the first days after puerperium till the hemodynamics are normal. So in addition, these spider lever, emphysema, edema, they are all common in pregnancy. Mostly they are seen in white women compared to the spider neve and palmar erythema. You see more and mostly in the white women compared to the blacks. Probably due to peripheral vasodilatation. Right? Then some of the liver dependent factors like 2, 7, 9 and 10. 2, 7, 9 and 10, they rise during pregnancy, but bleeding time and clotting time are usually normal. Right? These are liver dependent coagulation factors 2, 7, 9 and 10. And then fibrinogen is almost doubled by the end of pregnancy. So that if you have a normal value, as in cases of abruptio placenta or some other disseminated intravascular coagulation or consumptive coagulopathy, if you have a normal value also, it indicates a significant abnormality because fibrinogen is increased, almost doubled by the end of full-term gestation. In acute liver failure, a prolonged prothrombin time may be the first sign of coagulopathy. So whenever you are suspecting any abnormalities in the liver function, first thing you have to look at is the serum fibrinogen levels, that is plasma fibrinogen. Serum doesn't contain any fibrinogen. So plasma fibrinogen level and prolonged prothrombin time. These may be the first signs of liver dysfunction. And then as you all know that liver is responsible for all the metabolisms, both protein, fat and carbohydrate metabolism. So it's an organ of synthesis, it's an organ of metabolism, it's an organ for excretion of bile acids and other ones, is it not? So serum albumin will be reduced, the globulins are increased, and you find that the AG ratio is decreased during pregnancy. And many hormone binding proteins, transferrin levels are all increased. Okay? Then all the lipids are increased markedly. So this is again because of a metabolic adaptation, so that they will provide an alternative metabolites for the mother in case she is not taking food properly. These lipids will act as a source of glucose for the mother as well as for the baby. So you call pregnancy as a state of accelerated starvation. So the woman will go into ketonemia and ketonuria very fast when compared to non-pregnant level. Because whenever the woman has no carbohydrates for metabolism, there is an easy conversion to lipid metabolism. And so she will go into ketonuria and ketonemia very fast. Okay. So ketoacidosis, coma, death, and other ones. So like these are the conditions where this can occur, that is hyperemesis gravidarum, starvation, and uncontrolled diabetes mellitus, that is DKA, diabetic ketoacidosis. Followed? So fat metabolism is affected, protein metabolism is affected, and carbohydrate metabolism also is affected in case of liver cell diseases. So liver is also responsible, I have already told you, it's a storage organ for the glucose in the form of glycogen, so which is released in the fasting state. So when there is a massive liver cell necrosis in cases of acute fatty liver of pregnancy and other conditions, the woman goes into hypoglycemia and then into coma. Then protein metabolism, I already told you. So the Krebs cycle is affected. So the increased quantities of ammonia will be produced. Okay. And then the woman go into hepatic encephalopathy because of increased urea. So in summary, these are the normal physiological changes in LFT. Okay. Bilirubin, I have already told you, bilirubin, AST, ALT, and GGT, they are all unchanged or they may reduce, right? Globulins are increased, albumins are reduced, so AG ratio is reduced in pregnancy. This is normal change. So fibrinogen is increased till term, almost double the non-pregnant level. Alkaline phosphatase, I have already told you, much increased, more so towards the end of the pregnancy. So cholesterol, all the lipids are increased. Free fatty acids, cholesterol, triglycerides, all of them are increased because of they want to provide, they have to adapt to the maternal state, metabolic state. Okay, so when do you say, what do you mean by jaundice, first of all? What is jaundice?
Serum will greater than 2 mg%.
Yeah. So actually jaundice is derived from the French term called jaune, which means yellow. Okay, so jaundice is a condition where there is yellowish staining of the yellowish staining of what?
Skin sclera, palms and
Bulbar
etc.
conjunctiva. If it is in the newborn, you can even see in the tip of the nose, palm, soles, skin. Okay, so visible staining of the tissue will appear when serum bilirubin level exceeds 2 milligrams, right? 2 milligram%. Followed. So that is known as jaundice. So how do you look for jaundice? You have to look for the bulbar conjunctiva, sclera. So ask the patient to look up or look down.
Look down.
Look down. Look down. You have to examine the sclera of the patient. Whereas for anemia, you look at the palpebral conjunctiva. Lower palpebral conjunctiva, you will see pallor. Whereas here you will see yellowish staining. Okay. If it is a newborn, you can even see whole body. If you have seen any baby with a pathological jaundice, whole baby appears yellowish in color depending upon the amount of bilirubin levels, particularly in pathological jaundice like RH incompatibility and other ones. Okay. So the overall incidence I've already told you very rare, 1 to 3 in 1,000 deliveries. So the causes are broadly divided into these three. Okay, causes which are peculiar to pregnancy. That means these causes you will see only in pregnancy, right? Causes which are coincidental to pregnancy. Okay, and chronic liver disease. So it's very easy to remember causes of jaundice in pregnancy. Please follow only this classification. Don't follow any other classification. Okay, causes are peculiar to pregnancy, coincidental to pregnancy. Okay, that means pregnancy has nothing to do with this disease. Whereas peculiar to pregnancy means it is seen only during pregnancy. Whereas chronic liver disease. So these are the three main categories you have to remember for causes of jaundice in pregnancy. So what are the causes peculiar to pregnancy? Remember these 5 causes. That is 4 you remember. Intrahepatic cholestasis of pregnancy called ICP. It's called ICP. That means intrahepatic cholestasis of pregnancy, which is supposed to be the second most common cause for jaundice. Followed, what is the first most common cause for jaundice? Hey, all of you. What is the most common cause for jaundice?
Hemolytic disease. Malaria.
Hepatitis. Viral hepatitis. Okay. So intrahepatic cholestasis, that is ICP, it is called. Intrahepatic cholestasis of pregnancy. That is second most common cause, first being viral hepatitis. Then acute fatty liver of pregnancy, it is also referred to as acute yellow atrophy. Okay. Then preeclampsia, eclampsia, all of you know, HELLP syndrome. Okay. Then in the first trimester, severe hyperemesis gravidarum. So at least these 4 you try to remember. And endotoxic shock, which you can see either in septic abortions or MTPs complicated by sepsis or intrapartum sepsis, puerperal sepsis, any sepsis, endotoxic shock leading to disseminated intravascular coagulation. So even if you forget this endotoxic shock, it's okay. You remember these four causes which are peculiar to pregnancy. That is, in the first trimester, hyperemesis gravidarum, right? Then preeclampsia, eclampsia, HELLP syndrome. Okay. Then other two, these two are easy to remember. First trimester hyperemesis, second trimester preeclampsia, eclampsia. Then the other two you have to remember is ICP and acute fatty liver or acute early atrophy of liver. Okay. Done? All of you. Yes or no?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Please try to
Yes,
remember
ma'am.
causes. First trimester severe hyperemesis, second trimester preeclampsia, eclampsia, HELLP syndrome, acute fatty liver and ICP. Right? If you can remember the fifth one also, well and good. Otherwise, don't bother. Then unrelated or which are coexistent to pregnancy. That means pregnancy has nothing to do with these diseases. Even if the woman had not been pregnant, this would have occurred. Right? Coexistent to pregnancy. So viral hepatitis is the most important cause for jaundice in pregnancy. What is the second cause?
Intrahepatic cholestasis.
ICP is intrahepatic cholestasis of pregnancy. ICP is the second common cause. First common cause is viral hepatitis, that too A. How many are there? Viral hepatitis? How many viruses?
Five types.
Yeah. Ramachandra, what are the names of the viruses? Amma, viral hepatitis lo. Oh, ABCD lucharawa.
A, B, C, D, E.
A to E, ma'am.
ABCD and G also. Okay. ABCD and G.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
That A is the most common cause. But for which viral hepatitis do we screen routinely?
Hepatitis
In
B.
pregnancy?
B, ma'am. B.
Good. What is
B.
the other screen routinely?
HBsAg.
అదే బి అంటే అదేనే ముద్దు ఇంకా వాట్ ఆర్ ద అదర్ వైరసెస్ వి విల్ స్క్రీన్ routinely?
HIV.
Hepatitis C,
HIV,
ma'am.
very
C.
yeah, C also. Yeah, very good. So B has to be done. C is optional. There are centers where C is not available, but B and HIV, these two are the viral markers which have to be done in every case of pregnant women. Okay. So these causes are coexistent to pregnancy. That means pregnancy has nothing to do with these diseases. Even if the patient had not been pregnant, these diseases would have occurred, right? So viral hepatitis, A, B, C, D, E, G, then gallstones leading to obstructive jaundice, autoimmune hepatitis, drug-induced, drug abuse, infections. Okay. Among that, co-amoxiclav, amoxicillin with clavulanic acid, that's a combination. It's called co-amoxiclav. It's supposed to be the most common cause for cholestatic jaundice, right? So these are unrelated causes, among which you just remember at least viral hepatitis. That is more than sufficient. Followed?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, other infections, either maybe bacterial infections, parasitic infections, protozoal infections, whatever it may be, other infections. Then obstructive jaundice, mostly gallstones. Then autoimmune, drug-induced, drug abuse. Okay? So just remember viral hepatitis and other infections. Drug-induced, drug abuse. That's all. Obstructive jaundice. That is, remember 2 or 3, that is more than sufficient. But don't forget the 3 main headings of jaundice in pregnancy. So chronic liver diseases, this is very easy to remember. Maybe chronic hepatitis, maybe cirrhosis of liver, maybe hepatocellular carcinoma or hepatoma of the liver. So this is very easy to remember, right? Yes or no?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, these 3 you have to remember. Chronic liver disease, there's only 3: cirrhosis, chronic hepatitis, and hepatocellular carcinoma. Okay. So we have 3 main causes for jaundice in pregnancy. One is peculiar to pregnancy, other one is unrelated to pregnancy, and chronic liver diseases. Please remember only these 3 main causes for jaundice in pregnancy, among which viral hepatitis is the most common cause, followed by ICP, intrahepatic cholestasis of pregnancy, is the second most common cause. Followed? right?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So in our country, worldwide, the most common cause of jaundice is viral hepatitis, mostly A. Followed among the A, B, C, D, E, G, A is the most common cause worldwide for jaundice in pregnancy. In some parts of the world, hepatitis B, C, E are also more prevalent, right? Then ICP. ICP is also known as obstetric hepatosis or icterus gravidarum because it is appearing only in pregnancy. You call it as icterus gravidarum. Okay. So this is mostly supposed to be because of the circulating estrogens, whose function is to cause stasis of the bile within the biliary canalicula. The normal physiological function of estrogen is to cause the stasis of bile within the biliary canalicula is exaggerated in these women because of maybe genetic predisposition. So still we do not know why some of these women are having this problem of ICP. So the normal physiological function of circulating estrogen is exaggerated in these women. Okay. So genetic predisposition may be there, or there may be even some endocrinal problem, exaggerated function of the estrogens and progesterones. This is supposed to have an autosomal dominant inheritance. Okay, autosomal dominant inheritance. So there are some mutations for in the genes which code for the biliary transporters or receptors. So you need not remember these things. You just remember that there is a autosomal dominant inheritance for mutations of the genes. Okay, they are referred to as MDR3 gene mutation, but doesn't matter. You don't remember this. You just remember that this has got a genetic predisposition with an autosomal dominant inheritance with genetic mutations. Okay. So because of these genetic abnormalities, the woman becomes more susceptible to the cholestatic effect of the hormones. Right? Followed all of you? Yes or
Yes,
no?
ma'am.
Why the woman becomes more susceptible? Because of the genetic abnormalities.
Genetic.
Because of mutations for the genes which are coding for biliary transporters or receptors. అదంతా గుర్తుపెట్టుకోకర్లేదు. You just
MRP2.
అదంతా అక్కర్లేదులే మీకు. You will forget afterwards. So you just remember that there is an autosomal dominant inheritance of some mutations in the genes. That's the reason why this woman is becoming more susceptible to the normal physiological effect of the hormone, cholestatic effect of the hormone. So the signs and symptoms are, they usually appear in the last trimester, very insidious in onset. Okay. The most prominent symptom is generalized pruritus. So she will not have any rash, only generalized pruritus. Usually it starts with the palms and soles. Later on it will spread to the entire body, and it will be more in the nights, so that the patient will have this disturbed sleep. So generalized pruritus without rash is the main presenting symptom, and mostly in the last trimester. So it may be associated with generalized weakness, nausea, anorexia, just like in liver diseases, you will find all these symptoms: general weakness, nausea, vomiting, anorexia, and so on. But the most important thing you have to remember is jaundice is very mild, and it is seen in only 10% of the cases, right? Though we say it is the second most common cause for jaundice in pregnancy, it is seen only in 10% of the individuals, and also it is very mild. Hardly it exceeds 5 mg%. We said more than 2 is abnormal, is it not? So here jaundice is very mild in ICP. It hardly exceeds 5 milligrams. So the main symptom is only generalized pruritus because of accumulation of the bile acids, right? So liver enzymes, that is AST and LAT, are slightly raised. The total bile acids are very much elevated. What are the bile acids? Bile acids,
Cholic acid. Deoxycholic acid.
Hydrodeoxycholic acid.
primary bile acids and secondary bile acids. I'm not going into the detail. Time won't permit me to go into the detail. So primary bile acids, and we have secondary bile acids also. So cholic acid, deoxycholic acid, all those things. So all those bile acids are elevated, and these are predictive of fetal complications. So what are the fetal complications? We'll see later on. Okay, the threshold value is 1.63 milligram%. For every half milligram rise, the fetal complications will increase by 1 to 2%, right? And the condition resolves very rapidly after delivery because now there are no estrogens after delivery, placenta is out. But the problem is the recurrence rate is as high as 60% because it is genetically transmitted. So when the patient becomes pregnant the next time also she will have the same problem, right? So when they are counseling the patient, you have to tell her that there is a 60% chance that she may have the same problem in the next, right? So what is the main presenting symptom? Hello.
Pruritus.
Colitis.
General, only generalized pruritus.
Pruritus.
Yeah, generalized pruritus, initially starting with arms and sores, later on the entire body, more common in the night time, so that her sleep will be disturbed. So jaundice is very mild, rarely exceeds 5 milligram%. Liver enzymes are only slightly raised, but the main problem is rise in bile acids. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Perhaps, of course, we don't do any liver biopsy, but if at all it is done, I don't do during pregnancy. It shows only cholestasis. So intracellular bile accumulation, canalicular bile plugging, but you don't find any necrosis of the liver cells. There is no necrosis. That's the reason why you don't find any severe jaundice. Okay. Now this is associated, but in the mother there are no problems except for the generalized pruritus and slight elevation of bilirubin and transaminases. But the fetal risks are preterm labor, sudden IUD in the third trimester, because the disease itself is appearing in the third trimester. Meconium staining of the liquor is 4-fold rise of the meconium staining of the liquor. So that's the reason why all these pregnancies with ICP, they need to be terminated at 37 to 38 weeks. Because the chances of IUDs are common because of meconium staining of the liquor, intrauterine meconium aspiration leading to fetal death and other ones. So the mother has only the risk of postpartum hemorrhage, right? Then management is nothing specific, only antihistamines to relieve the pruritus. Cholestyramine can be given. Vitamin K can also be given because of the risk of postpartum hemorrhage. Then UDCA, that is also deoxycholic acid, which is a tertiary cholic acid, can be given in the doses of 500 milligrams twice daily to reduce the enterohepatic circulation. So what does it do? It reduces the absorption of bile acids into the circulation. So it inhibits the, you know what is enterohepatic circulation? All of you. Rama.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
So there is something called enterohepatic circulation where all these bile acids are again absorbed back into the circulation at the terminal intestines, ileum. That is inhibited by this UDCA so that the bile acids will be reduced and the pruritus will be relieved. And very rarely dexamethasone is used in resistant cases which do not respond to UDCA. Okay. So the complications are maternal complication is only PPH after delivery, but fetal risks are more in the form of sudden IUD. That's what we are worried about. Then they may also go into preterm labor. Meconium staining of the liquor is 4-fold rise. So don't allow these women to go up to 40 weeks. So once the term is achieved, that is 37 completed weeks, please deliver them either by induction of labor or straight away cesarean, whatever the case may be, right? The management is only a symptomatic management, antihistamines, cholestyramine, vitamin K, UDCA, and very, very rarely we may have to use steroids in the form of dexamethasone, 12 milligrams IV per day for 10 days, very rarely, and it is controversial also, right? So that finishes off about ICP. So nothing very serious except for IUDs. So you have to terminate it. That's the only problem with ICP, and it is recurrent in the next pregnancy. It is genetically acquired. Next comes the preeclampsia and HELLP syndrome. I think all of you are aware of this problem. HELLP syndrome. What is HELLP syndrome?
Hemolysis, elevated liver enzymes, and low platelet.
Increased blood pressure.
No. HELP, ma. HELP acronym expand చేయండి.
Hemolysis, Elevated liver enzymes and low platelets.
enzymes, LP,
Low platelets.
low platelet count. Very good, Shabash. So this is the complication of preeclampsia eclampsia syndrome. Okay. So I'm not going into the details of HELLP syndrome. It complicates around 3 to 10% of preeclamptic pregnancies. Okay. So typically the patient will have complaints of nausea, vomiting, epigastric pain, right upper quadrant pain because of the stretching of the Glissen's capsule. And jaundice is mainly because of hemolysis. Is that hemolysis, no HELLP syndrome? Right? Jaundice is because of hemolysis, not because of the liver problem. Okay. So complaints are nausea, vomiting, epigastric pain, right upper quadrant end because of the stretching of the liver capsule, Glissen's capsule. Then jaundice will occur in those who develop hemolysis. What type of hemolysis it is? What type of hemolysis it is? What is the name given to it? Microangiopathic hemolytic anemia. MAHA గుర్తుపెట్టుకోండి. Microangiopathic hemolytic anemia. MAHA. Okay. Let's not go into the details. So liver is not involved primarily. So the HELLP syndrome, liver is not primarily targeted. It's a part of the generalized disease. Is it not? Every organ is affected in preeclampsia, not only liver. Even the kidneys are affected, the placenta is affected, okay? Lungs, brain, all the organs are affected because of vasospasm. In the same way, liver is also affected as a target organ, okay? As a part of the syndrome, preeclampsia eclampsia syndrome. So the incident depends upon the severity, is mostly seen in fatal cases. So histologically, you are not supposed to do any histology during pregnancy. In some cases where they have done, they found that there is periportal fibrin deposition, hemorrhage, and hepatocellular necrosis, and subcapsular hematomas and rupture leading to intra-abdominal hemorrhage, hemorrhagic shock. They are all very rare, but they have been reported. Okay, so you find fibrin deposition in because of DIC. Why fibrin is getting deposited? Because of disseminated intravascular coagulation. There is a periportal fibrin deposition, hemorrhage is there, and hepatocellular necrosis. So subcapsular hematoma and rupture are the complications leading to hemorrhagic shock, intraperitoneal hemorrhage and hemorrhagic shock. You may have to do a laparotomy and do something. Okay, either a ligate, suture, or excise that part of the lobe or whatever. Then hepatic failure is very, very uncommon. Followed, all of you? Hepatic failure is uncommon in HELLP syndrome, right? So differential diagnosis is mainly AFLP, that is acute fatty liver of pregnancy. Then preeclampsia with fulminant hepatic failure and ordinary viral hepatitis. Okay. So these are the things, the differential diagnosis for HELLP syndrome, right? Okay. So the complications of HELLP syndrome, that is a part of the preeclampsia, eclampsia, it is around 2%. Whereas the perinatal mortality rate is as high as 30%, more than 30%. But the most serious complications are as the same as you see in severe preeclampsia, that is DIC, renal failure, placental abruption, then pulmonary edema, right? Then this pulmonary edema, it is called a non-cardiogenic pulmonary edema. It is not because of the heart, okay? And then subcapsular hematomas and liver rupture. These are all very rare. So these are the most serious complications which are associated with the maternal mortality of 2% and the perinatal mortality of 33%, right? Okay, na?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So preeclampsia, eclampsia, HELLP syndrome, it's a part of the syndrome, okay? So you don't find liver failure. Jaundice is because of hemolysis, that is microangiopathic hemolytic anemia. Maternal mortality is around 2%. Perinatal mortality is more than 30%. The complications are DIC, renal failure, placental abruption, okay, non-cardiogenic pulmonary edema. Very rarely, subcapsular hematoma in the liver and liver rupture, right? There is no time. I can't wait for your answers. Okay, management of HELLP syndrome, just like for preeclampsia, what is the final management? What is the final management for preeclampsia? Though you are using drugs, Pritchard regime, this and that. What is the final treatment? Ramachandra. ఏంటి ఒకళ్ళు కూడా ఆన్సర్ చేయరు. How do you what is the final treatment, final answer for preeclampsia?
Termination of pregnancy.
Deliver the patient. Okay, whether it is preterm, term, whatever it may be, depending upon this. If the patient is not responding to all the treatment that you have given, all antihypertensives, all pre-chart regimes, all those things, she is not responding, immediately terminate the pregnancy, prompt delivery. Same thing for HELLP syndrome also. Once the patient of preeclampsia develops HELLP syndrome, you have to immediately deliver the patient. Okay. So currently there is insufficient evidence to support the use of adjunctive steroids. We don't have sufficient studies for the treatment of steroids. Okay. Then the biochemical abnormalities usually peak 24 to 48 hours postpartum, but then they normalize within 2 to 3 days. Okay. Next comes the acute fatal error of pregnancy, AFLP. So this is a very rare but serious. So why if it is rare, why we are talking about it? Because it's a serious complication, even if it is rare. That's why we are speaking of jaundice also, is it not? Jaundice is also rare, but then we are talking about it because it has got serious consequences on the mother as well as on the baby. That's the reason why we are discussing this subject. So in the same way, AFLP, that is acute fatty liver of pregnancy, it's a very, very rare disease, but very serious because it is fatal, not just complication. It's fatal to the mother as well as to the fetus. So these are the risk factors, that is mostly primates, women with preeclampsias, multiple pregnancies, and for some reason male fetuses. The woman carrying a male fetus is supposed to be more prone for AFLP, right? Then this also is associated with an abnormality in the fetus. Probably AFLP is one of the rare disorders where a fetal problem is giving rise to a disease in the mother. You don't find any other condition where the fetal abnormality is leading to maternal problems. Do you have any other condition where the fetal problem is leading to mother's problem? Can you guess any other problem? All of you, are you there? Oh, my dear students, are you there, all of you?
Yes, ma'am.
Please, yeah, are you there, all of you listening? Sleeping? Okay. This is a very rare condition where a fetal is resulting in maternal problems, almost killing the mother also, as well as itself. Do you find any other, tell me in the next class, do you have any other condition where the abnormality in the fetus is causing problems to the mother? You tell me in the next class. So this is a rare disease, fatal to the mother, often fatal, not always, often fatal to the mother and the fetus. The risk factor is primary preeclampsia, multiple pregnancy, and a mother carrying a male fetus. So this is supposed to be associated with a mutant gene producing a defect in the mitochondrial fatty acid oxidation in the fetus. What is the deficiency? Can anybody guess what is the deficiency? Any guess? No? So there is a defect in the fetus. That is, the defect is mitochondrial fatty acid oxidation. Okay. So this is really the cause is not known, but it is multifactorial with a genetic component in many individuals. It occurs due to an autosomal recessive abnormality. Okay. In the fetal long chain fatty acid beta oxidation, it is called LCHAT deficiency. Followed all of you? The full form of LCHAT is long chain, okay, long chain fatty acid beta oxidation deficiency. This is called an LCHAT deficiency, which is long chain, leading to a defect in the long chain fatty acid oxidation. So this is a disorder of the mitochondrial fatty acid oxidation. That means fatty acid oxidation is occurring in the mitochondria, which are lacking this enzyme. What is LCHAD? LCHAD is long chain hydroxyethyl CoA dehydrogenase. Followed? So because of that, the fetus is not able to metabolize all these fatty acids completely. So all the highly toxic intermediate are accumulating in the maternal liver as well as in the placenta. The baby has no no way of excreting these toxic intermediates. So it throws into the placenta, because placenta is a excretory organ for the baby, for the fetus, is it not? So it throws all these accumulated toxic metabolites into the placenta, which goes back into the maternal liver. Followed, all of you?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Here is the baby has a problem. It has got a deficiency of an enzyme which is called LCHAD. LCHAD means long chain hydroxyl CoA dehydrogenase. So this enzyme is responsible for fatty acid oxidation. So this enzyme metabolize long chain fatty acids completely. So fatty acids start accumulating, which are highly toxic. Now, since the baby cannot feed by itself, placenta is its for the fetus, is it not? Placenta serves the function for everything. Excretory, secretory, oxygen, this thing, that thing, everything, baby for the fetus is the placenta. So all these toxic intermediates are thrown back to the placenta, and from the placenta they go back to the liver. LCHAD deficiency leading to accumulation. So pathologically, you see that the liver, that's why it is called acute yellow atrophy. The liver is small, atrophied. It is soft, yellow, and greasy in consistency. So histologically, there is swollen hepatocytes in which the cytoplasm is filled with microvesicular fat. Okay. So all the hepatocytes are filled with the microvesicular fat, because all the intermediate fatty acids are coming back to the liver of the mother. So all the hepatocytes are filled with this fat. Okay, with the central nucleus, but there is periportal sparing. So minimal hepatocellular. So similar changes you can also see in the renal tubular cells as well as in the placenta. So acute yellow atrophy. So liver is small, soft yellow. The hepatocytes are swollen. Okay, they are filled with microvesicular fat, and there is minimal hepatocellular necrosis. So the cause I have already told you, mostly due to LCHAD deficiency. So usually it is asymptomatic if the fetus is heterozygous. Okay. But if the baby is homozygous, these children, they often die in the childhood because of liver cell failure or cardiomyopathy or due to hypoglycemia. Those who live longer will develop chorioretinopathy, rhabdomyopathy, and peripheral neuropathy, that is in the child after delivery. So there are many mutations in the alpha subunit of this mitochondrial protein, which causes LCHAD deficiency. You need not remember all these things. You just remember what is LCHAD and what does it do. So how does this patient present? That is about the baby. What we have discussed previously is about the baby. Okay, asymptomatic if it is heterozygous, but if it is homozygous, if it is affected, they will die due to liver cell failure, cardiomyopathy, hypoglycemia, or if they survive, they develop all this chorioretinopathy, rhabdomyopathy, peripheral neuropathy, and so on. And what will happen to the mother? What is happening to the mother? So the signs and symptoms of AFLP are very vague and non-specific. So the diagnosis is very difficult, and the diagnosis is only by exclusion. So you have to exclude all other causes of jaundice in pregnancy. Then only you can say that this is AFLP. And the most important key for the diagnosis is the rapidity with which the patient deteriorates. Right? The patient deteriorates very, very rapidly. That is one of the keys for the diagnosis. The patient becomes bad very rapidly. Right? That is one of the key signs to diagnose AFLP. So if the patient is deteriorating very rapidly, one of the causes could be an AFLP. Right? And combined with pictures of hepatic synthetic failure, that is patient presents with hypoglycemia, presents with clotting abnormalities, hepatic encephalopathy she is going in for, then you have to suspect a acute AFLP. So other conditions, they don't impair liver function in this way. So the patient doesn't deteriorate so fast in other conditions. So she goes into hypoglycemia, clotting abnormalities, and ultimately she goes into hepatic encephalopathy and she dies. So other condition, they don't progress very rapidly, resulting in death of the patient. So the key for diagnosis is only the rapidity of deterioration of the individual. So in many women, the condition worsens after diagnosis. Marked hypoglycemia is very common, and 60% of them, they go into hepatic encephalopathy, that is hepatic coma. And severe coagulopathy will be seen in 55% of the individual, that is more than 60% will go into hepatic encephalopathy. Half of them will go into severe coagulopathy, half of them will go into renal failure, and fetal death is very common. So that's the reason we said, though it is a very, very rare disease, still we have to know about it because it is fatal both to the mother as well as to the baby. Have you seen the causes of death are marked hypoglycemia, hepatic encephalopathy, severe coagulopathy, renal failure, right? So the earlier reports indicated a maternal mortality of more than 75% and a fetal mortality of as high as 90%. So see the figures, 75% of the mothers are dying, 90% of the babies are dying. Followed. But now because of the improved, now we have a number of HDU units, that is high dependency units, improved ICU care, okay? Because of that, the recent reports are indicating an increased maternal survival, though fetal mortality still is remaining high. So that's the reason why we are supposed to know about AFLP, because of high maternal mortality and high fetal mortality. Okay, though there is some improvement because we have a better understanding of the physiology nowadays, and with better monitoring facilities, better other facilities, HDUs, ICUs, and so on. So what are the investigations you will do? Raised transaminases, ALT, AST, all of them are raised 3 to 10 times the normal. Bilirubin may be more than, equal to, or more than, or around about 10 mg%. So this much of jaundice you don't see in any other condition. So other complications like hypoglycemia, hyperuricemia, neutrophilic leukocytosis, hypofibrinogenemia, mild thrombocytopenia, raised FTP, all these are suggestive of coagulation defects. Right? So all these things are the causes for the death of them. Then Maha, I told you, microangiopathic hemolysis, echinocytes, predominant red cell abnormalities because of there is impaired synthesis of the red cell membrane. Because the liver is damaged, it is not able to synthesize the red cell membrane properly, the lipid component. So in the same way as in preeclampsia, there the condition is different. There because of the vascular damage, they go into hemolysis. But here there is a problem with the synthesis of the lipid component of the red cell membrane. So there is hemolysis. Followed all of you? So raised bilirubin up to 10 mg%, transaminases 3 to 10 times, all these complications. Okay. Then hemolysis. So these are the causes for death. Then you can even do an ultrasound, CT, MRI have also been used to diagnose AFLP, but they are not very accurate in detecting fatty infiltration. Liver biopsy is helpful diagnostics tool, but it is very, very hazardous in pregnancy, and that too in presence of deranged clotting. If the patient has a DIC, it is all the more dangerous to do a liver biopsy. So, and no biopsy should be done in pregnancy, neither a liver biopsy nor a bone marrow biopsy in anemia. Where do you do bone marrow biopsy? In anemia, we don't do bone marrow biopsy for anemic individuals. However severe the anemia is, even though the patient is not responding, we usually don't do. In the same way, liver biopsy also should not be done in pregnancy, right? So the management, spontaneous resolution follows and delivery. So early diagnosis and delivery is going to improve the maternal and fetal outcome. So multidisciplinary approach, HDU units, ICU units, maternal research, all symptomatic treatment of hypoglycemia, intake output balance, fluid balance, maintenance of correcting the coagulopathy, correcting the renal failure, all symptomatic treatment, right? So vaginal delivery is best because of the coagulopathy. So many fetuses are dead. Are you there, all of you? Hello.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Very good. Vaginal delivery best for the mother because in presence of coagulopathy, better not to put a knife. So many fetuses are dead by the time we diagnose AFLP. Is it not? Because the mother is in a state of acidosis in severe cases, and others they do not tolerate the stress of labor very poorly. This is the high fetal loss. We say already said it is more than 90% of the babies are dead either in utero or soon after death, soon after birth. Right? Maternal death are again because of renal failure, hypoglycemia, acidosis, severe PPH or APH, then renal failure, circulatory collapse, infection, aspiration pneumonias, associated pancreatitis, gastrointestinal bleeding. So these are all the causes for the maternal death, right? So the therapy is only symptomatic. We don't have any specific treatment. Whatever complication the patient is having, you have to address the complication, right? So either because of the delivery or because of time, the hepatic dysfunction usually resolves. If the patient survives, she will come back to normal slowly, right? Meanwhile, intensive medical support is required because we say 75% is the maternal mortality death rate. So you have to be very careful addressing to all the complications. So intensive medical support is required as the patient is recovering after delivery. So postpartum also continue ICU care, watch for PPH, sepsis and wound hematomas, maybe episiotomy or other hematomas. Then blood transfusion product should be kept ready because of the coagulopathy, PPH, APH and so on. Then rare cases may need even liver transplantation may be considered if the patient is not improving. If there is no resolving of the liver dysfunction, in rare cases, even liver transplantation may be considered now that it has become a very safe and easy procedure nowadays. So diabetes insipidus is in 50% of these individuals. In these cases also, if the woman survives, she will have a recurrent rate of 15 to 25%. What is the recurrence rate in ICP? Oi, ICP, what did we say recurrence rate? Era? ఇంకా 4 స్లైడ్లు ఉన్నాయి 5 minutes లో అవదు
4%.
60%. Okay.
70%.
AFLP, more than 60% recurrence rate. Okay. Hyperemesis gravidarum, all of you know, severe protracted vomiting resulting in weight loss, dehydration, starvation, and ketoacidosis. Okay. This is also very rare, 0.5 to 1%, mostly psychological abnormality, endocrine, biochemical, psychological factors, and some of them have tested for positive for H. pylori infections. Then this is the transient hepatic dysfunction leading to jaundice and moderate rise of transaminases. So the treatment here also is non-specific, correction of fluid and electrolyte balance, correction of hypoglycemia, put them on antiemetics, and there is a role of corticosteroids in these individuals. Okay. So this is not a very serious condition. Proper psychotherapy patient actually needs a lot of psychotherapy. And these individuals have a lot of psychological factors. Then comes to the most important is viral hepatitis in pregnancy. ABCD, EG already. So everything is the same as in non-pregnant. Etiology, mode of transmission, clinical features, everything is same as in non-pregnant. And most of them are self-limiting disorders, except in malnourished individuals, immunocompromised individuals, and acute fulminant infections in advanced pregnancies. Very acute fulminant infections. So among all these, hepatitis E is supposed to be associated with fulminant hepatic failure and a very high maternal mortality. It is supposed to be responsible for epidemics. Okay, high maternal mortality with hepatitis E. Okay. Then A, everything is the same. Diagnosis is by anti-IgM antibodies to HAV. The prognosis, everything is same. Pregnancy does not increase susceptibility, right? Mild self-limiting illness, most of the signs and symptoms will resolve in 3 weeks. And viral hepatitis A, what is the importance? Most common cause for jaundice in pregnancy. Okay, na? So virology, IP, incubation period, transmission features, diagnosis, everything is same as in non-pregnant individuals. Self-limiting disorders, most of them resolve in 3 weeks. Sometimes it may cause preterm labor, PPROM. Okay. The complications are 7% of these women may have cholestasis, like fever, prolonged jaundice, pruritus. 10% may have a prolonged and relapsing disease. So it keeps on relapsing again and again. And only less than 1% of these women will develop acute fulminant hepatitis and death. So it's very rare. So the mortality rate is less than 0.5%, right? So usually it is the same. And the most important thing you have to remember, unlike hepatitis B, is that there is no carrier state for A, and it is not teratogenic, right? No carrier state, it is not teratogenic, there is no vertical transmission. These 3 points you have to remember. Everything else is the same as in non-pregnant women. The maternal mortality rate is very less than 0.5%. There is no carrier state, it is not teratogenic, there is no vertical transmission. So transmission is only postpartum through the fecal-oral route. Okay, so prevention is the same. That is sanitation, safe drinking water, personal hygiene. That's what you are following now, COVID days, same thing. Okay, immunization. So all at-risk women who are exposed will receive a vaccine, inactivated killed virus vaccine, and you have to receive give them a booster after 6 to 12 months. So passive immunization is also available with immunoglobulins within 2 weeks after exposure. It is supposed to be 80 to 90% effective. And the same way, even the neonatal infection also can be prevented by giving immunoglobulin 0.02 ml per kg body weight. You just remember that this is available. Both vaccine is available as well as passive immunization immunoglobulin is also available for exposed pregnant women and even for the neonates. So if the mother develops infection within 2 weeks or and 1 week after delivery, right? That is about a treatment. There is no specific treatment, only supportive treatment. So correct the anemia, fluid electrolyte imbalance, provide adequate nutrition. If transfusion is needed, blood component therapy. So there is no role for termination of pregnancy. So termination of pregnancy is not going to alter the course of the disease. Unlike those diseases which we have said peculiar to pregnancy, there you have to terminate the pregnancy, is it not? Whereas here, the termination of pregnancy is not going to alter the course of the disease. So allow the patient to proceed normally and deliver normally. The normal delivery or cesarean, whatever it may be. Then viral hepatitis B is most important. We know about epidemiology, transmission, incubation period, clinical features, same as in non-pregnant women. The magnitude of the problem is, so transmission is important. This has got a vertical transmission, mother to child transmission is accounts for more than 40% of chronic carrier state in the baby. So all pregnant women need to be screened for HBs antigen antenatally. That is what we are doing, is it not? All pregnant women are screened for HBsAg. 4 minutes. So HBsAg is just right? So if they are negative, then all high-risk individuals should be rescreened again at 28 weeks, like drug abusers, so IV needle users, so blood transfusion, so sexual transmission, high-risk behavior, rescreen at 28 weeks if they are negative. The main aim why we are screening them is because nothing for the mother, nothing will happen to the mother, but there is transmission to the baby. Okay, vertical transmission. So you can provide neonatal immunoprophylaxis to the babies who are born to the mother. Now here we are worried only about the babies. Nothing will happen to the mother. So mostly the mother has no symptoms or subclinical. So 90% of the women, not only women, adults. I think the time of. Sorry. Okay. 90% of the adults, not only women, men, everybody who acquire this infection, they clear the infection if they are immunocompetent, right? 90% of them are clearing the infection. Only 0.1 to 0.5% will develop acute fulminant hepatitis, and we are talking about pregnancy. Acute fulminant hepatitis in pregnancy, probably this is immune mediated. That's why it is developing less than 0.5%. So another 5 to 10% are the ones who cannot clear the virus, and these are the patients who are going into chronic hepatitis B. Followed all of you? This is very, very important. So 90% of the men and women will clear the infection, right? 5 to 10% of women, they are not able to clear this infection, and these are the ones who are becoming carriers, right? only 0.1 to 0.5% of the women in pregnancy are going in for acute fulminant hematitis, which is probably immune mediated, right? Supposing HSB-AG is negative when you are screening the women at risk, they can receive active immunization after the first trimester or a passive immunization soon after exposure. Supposing the husband is positive, then she can get a passive immunization after the exposure, that is hepatitis B immunoglobulin 0.06 ml per kg at 0 and 1 month. Even for healthcare providers, all of you have taken a HBS vaccine? All students? All of you?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
No, ma'am.
I have few more slides, but there's no time. Okay, number తీసుకున్న వాళ్ళందరూ please. We are all healthcare providers. So any needle prick, anything, we may get infected by hepatitis B virus. So all of you, please take the vaccine. Those who have not taken it. Okay, bye. Good day. Be safe, all of you. I got few more slides. Any ఇంకా? Slides ఉన్నాయి ఇంకా? Escape కొడుతురాదా? చాలా ఉన్నాయా? అంటే 10 కూడా లేవు ఇంకా. 4 ఏమో ఉన్నాయి అంతే. సర్లే. ఇది చెప్పి నెక్స్ట్ క్లాస్ లో నెక్స్ట్ టాపిక్ చెప్తాను సార్. ఓకే అమ్మా, బాయ్
Thank
ఆల్ ఆఫ్
you.
యూ.